first of all, I mean, thank you so much for accepting my invitation for this meeting. I think it will be remarkable to get the chance to hear your insights about arts and about the animation industry. I hope this conversation will help the people who has a special interest on arts and animation in general. So, Alisi, would you please tell about yourself a little bit, about what you have been in these days and how are you feeling in general?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for this opportunity. Like, I really appreciate it. And yeah, and it's the world is kind of, in a way, kind of becoming smaller, in a way. So, yeah, I'm feeling good. So I moved from Montreal, Canada to Berlin, Germany at the end of 2019. So I'm originally from Mongolia, actually.
Yeah.
And then as a teenager, I moved to Canada, Montreal, Canada. So I did all my formal training in Montreal at the same university. I studied fine arts. And then the department is film animation inside the fine arts program. And at the beginning, I was very interested in painting. And then by chance, I got into film animation. I didn't know anything about animation, like not at all. But then I learned that actually this program is more pushing students towards making independent films, to become independent artists, rather than working for big studios. So, some people changed their path. Some people graduated, they learn more technical stuff in order to have a job. I totally understand that. But I continued making my own films, and I stayed on my own path. Yeah. So that's basically what.
But what brings you in Montreal, Canada, in the first place?
Oh, some of my family are there, so I went there as a teenager. Yeah.
Wow, cool. Well, thank you. I mean, Alisi, also we will be very grateful if you could reveal the inspiration that you have in you doing along your art journey. And how did you come up with the idea combining paints and animation in the first place?
That's a very good question. Yeah. So when I was a student, I was in this independent, super artsy school like program, and we watched lots of independent animation instead of the films from Disney, for example. So we watched films from the National Film Board of Canada. They're all independent, low-budget film comparing to the big studios and companies. And I also watched lots of films by artists, independent artists, such as Yuri Norstein, the Russian animation.
The Russian, yeah. Right.
And William Kantridge, he's from South Africa.
Yeah.
But that background is very diverse. He was in theater, he does printmaking, he does all kinds of various different types of arts. He also makes animated films. And then I was very inspired by his work because he does this under camera animation, but very huge paper. And then he used this charcoal drawing. And then he draws on the same piece of paper. He just draws and then erases the previous frame and then take a picture and then draws again.
Like so frame by frame, right? You mean?
Yeah, frame by frame. Frame by frame animation, but without changing the paper. So we see all the traces. And it's basically a time-lapse photography of drawing. I was very inspired by what he does. It's a perception of time, and then you see your own labor, the traces of your labor is there. I was very intrigued, so I did lots of exercise. I mean, at that time, we had many exercises with different techniques like pixelation, and stop motion. We did drawing on paper, character design, all kinds of animation, but I was very intrigued by what William Kantridge did. So we had a specific exercise just kind of inspired by his work. At the beginning, it wasn't working because I was trying the same. It's like huge, and then I was drawing super large on a huge format, and then it's like, I could never finish my film. It's super long. And then I was thinking, how about make it smaller? And I want to use colors instead of just like black and white. I want to experiment with colors. And I started with chalk pastel, acrylic, and all kinds of different materials. And then because he was working on the wall, like he pasted the paper on the wall, like vertically. And then I realized if I work with small, maybe I will just make the camera facing down. So it basically becomes under camera animation. It's a straight ahead animation technique. Under camera technique. So basically like cut out or paint on glass. So under camera animation is basically the camera is mounted on the top, fixed at the same place, and then underneath you have a table, and then the artwork or the animation is fixed at the same place. So both of them, they don't move. It's in a way, it's like you see the labor, you see the traces of the drawing, you see the labor of your animation. It's not super clean, like super beautiful, like 2D drawing or super clean 3D animation, but you have this handcraftedness, you have this labor and handcraft, is like a handmade sense, and then you see the texture and materials. That's why I found it very interesting. So sand animation, like working with sand, like with a sandbox, or paint on glass animation, or cutout animation, because it's 2D flat, 2D. And then also with many layers, like Yuri Norstein, actually he worked with multi-plane, he worked with many layers, but it's also under the camera. So yeah, we did lots of exercises, and inspired by William Kantridge, I did lots of exercises and tests with colors. And at the beginning, it wasn't working. It was like, it took me forever. It wasn't working. And then, but I was stubborn in a way. I just continued. Finally, it worked. Yeah, finally I worked with oil pastel and many different mixed media. But it just took some time to really experiment.
I think you are really stubborn, because what you have been doing with this kind of work, it really has like some kind of dedication, right?
At the beginning, I thought maybe under camera is so labor intensive and time consuming, but actually I compared my workflow with some other animation artists working in 2D animation, like digital or on paper or like 3D. I compared my workflow with them. Actually, I found it's not that slow, because as soon as I'm done with my animation, I don't have post-production. I don't have to go back and color it. It's pretty much straightforward. I don't have to go back and redo something again. So it's the advantage, I guess.
As far as I assume, the animations you have done, you are using a piece of paper and camera also, and auxiliary equipment for painting in the entire project, right? So with this simple but also like patience demanding style of work, you have to deal with the problems all by yourself. The outcome of this hard work and dedication, we are witnessing breathtaking frames, Alisi.
Thank you.
What are the secrets maintaining your focus without losing it all?
That's another good question, because you're in animation, So I mean, animation is just long, and then I'm sure each person has story to tell. Like I mean, if you're in art or you make films, you have a message to convey. Even though it's that long, you somehow want to get the message out, so you make it.
Well, I've been doing some documentary movies, the short ones here in Istanbul, and I really understand you. I'm not that kind of skillful like you, but I can understand you, I think.
Oh no, thank you.
You're welcome. Other question I would like to ask, I mean, the common approach in your films, we are seeing a solid relationship between nature and human, You like to melt in the same pot, these two, the nature and the human. I think it may also connect it with your Mongolian part, right? Could you please talk about it a little more? I mean, how can we read your way of thinking?
Yeah, sure. So it's another good question. So earlier when I was younger, I just know that I heard about all this because my grandparents were living as nomads on the Mongolian grassland. So they gave me lots of wisdom, and then I heard lots of like stories and ritual, and then how they lived with animals and nature. So there are certain rituals and ceremonies that humans respect nature, have a reverence for nature.
Yeah.
And then I think it's very interesting. That's what I learned. I mean, when I heard when I was younger, but then when I grew up later, I learned that actually it's something in common among indigenous peoples around the world. Indigenous people, it's a kind of tricky definition because I mean it's quite obvious in North America when you talk about indigenous people. It's the people who lived there before the colonization. I mean it's quite obvious in North America, but other parts of the world they are also indigenous people. For example, they have a particular lifestyle and cultural tradition, language, and they also have a very specific connection to the land, to their land, nature, or natural resource. They have a very particular way of living and dealing with nature and animal, and have a particular language tradition. So they are all indigenous people, I would say, outside of this colonial context. So I would identify myself as indigenous person. I'm an indigenous artist. So, and then within this bigger frame, I realized that there are so many things in common among indigenous peoples around the world. Especially when I showed my last film, the feedback that I got is that even people in Brazil or in Italy, they would say, we had something similar. So that's I found very interesting. And so my last film, I will just briefly tell you what it is so that it will be clear. So my last film, it's called The Fourfold. I interviewed my grandmother. So my grandmother basically talked about this kind of worshipping of Mother Earth, nature, and then Tengri. I think in Turkey you also have Tengri.
Yeah.
So she talked about that. Basically, it's really like human, nature, and earth, and or deities together, like in the world. So you have respect for natural resources, and you have respect for nature. And there are lots of wisdom among indigenous people because of this, especially started from the past 20 years because of the climate change. And then also this human-induced negative environmental change, like how they are damaging natural habitats in many places like rainforest. So, and then the indigenous wisdom, like among the traditional wisdom, and they become super relevant. There's so much wisdom in the contemporary moment, how humans could relate to nature. And it's the opposite of this kind of Euro-Western centric point of view. I mean, of course, Eurocentric and Western centric point of view is also slowly changing, but they have this dominant model of anthropocentric. They put human in the center of the universe, started from modernity.
Yeah, you're right. From in the name of modernity, right.
Yeah, and then they would think that they would exploit one planet and then exploit another planet. So that's the model that started from like 16th century, I would say. But so that's still very dominant. That's why I think that outside of the Euro-Western arena, for example, people from Turkey and from other areas of the world, there are lots of wisdom that is different from this Eurocentric point of view. And I think it's very precious in our contemporary moment.
Yeah. As you mentioned, I mean, they are speaking from another planet, They think that all things in the world has to do with the people. I mean, but on the other hand, we have a nature to respect, right?
Yeah.
Not just like spoil it.
Yeah.
It's very, I mean, in this way of thinking, what you have done with your works, it's really remarkable.
Oh, thank you.
Alisi, some of your works you did all by yourself, and some of them you have done with the collaboration of others. I guess you always had the chance to do your part alone with your own mindset, A short movie called Solitude, I think. You are starting your monologue with animating is a long journey of solitude, which I think is spot on expression. Do you want to talk about the main differences, these two separate way of working? I mean, working with collaboration and working just alone.
Yeah, of course. So usually I work just by myself, and it's kind of weird when I submit my film to a festival, for example, and then they always ask for a team member or like, and then usually the animated films, not just mine, but many other independent animated films, you just see the credits. It's always the same person's name.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel it's good that you have all the creative control as an independent animator. You control, basically you do everything. So of course you have this creative control. It takes your time and energy, but you're dedicated. You know how it goes. You don't have to explain that much to other people about how you want it to be. I guess that's like one advantage. And another advantage is that I don't know how it works in Turkey, but in Canada, they have this federal funding. They support more independent artists. For example, Canada Council for the Arts. They would like to support more independent artists. So the director has to be the animator or the main animator.
Like an author, right? You mean,
Exactly. Yeah.
kind of author, yeah.
Exactly. So that's the model they support. I think it's great. But I did the new film. I think I started 2017. It was the first time I worked with a big team. The film is called Grogne, and we got the distributor. It's going to be in festivals starting from this fall, probably, starting from this year, in September or something. It was the first time I worked with a big team. It's at the beginning it was really difficult, like because I have to constantly explain, and then I have to I was playing kind of the role of a producer at the same time, and then there's so much other issues to deal with, like budget and money. Of course, I have a collaborator. She's also the producer and script writer.
Okay.
And so we have to talk a lot about how the film goes. And it wasn't going well at some point at the beginning. Of course, we had some arguments, but throughout the whole experience, I feel like I learned a lot about how to work with people. I think it's good to have some experience working with people.
Yeah, you mentioned that also. I mean, it's also kind of hard to deal with all the problems with just yourself, because we are talking about a huge dedication and hard work at the same time, and you have a limited time for just you, right? It's also kind of difficult, but congrats. I mean, all the things you have done.
Oh, thank you. But for the stop motion, this film is a stop motion film with the big team. That's why it's a different story, because we need people who specializes in constructing certain things. I couldn't do everything. It's kind of obvious. It's not like the under camera, I just paint. This time it's like somebody built the houses. Like there's some miniature houses and accessories. Somebody built everything. That's a separate job.
Is there kind of art director in that movie?
Yeah, we hired an art director. Actually, we were lucky. She studied miniature architecture.
Wow, it's good. So how did you find yourself in a position that you have to express everything you have in your mind, to those people? So how can you deal with this?
Yeah, I mainly dealt with the artistic part. For example, because the producing part is the main job of the producer. Because the film was made in Montreal, everything was in French. All our collaborators were francophone.
Yeah.
And so the producer, the co-producer, mainly dealt with the budget and dealing with people and booking the equipment, etc. I learned a lot through this process. It's really complicated, I think. From my experience, I found it quite complicated. For the artistic point of view, I always had to find references.
Do you also speak French, or?
Yeah, I speak, but not the French accent, the accent from Canada.
Okay. Let's talk about the feeling of appreciation from others. You have achieved plenty of awards and nominations, I think, from festivals all around the world, of course.
Oh, thank you.
How does it feel to be able to share your pieces of art in terms of this level of achievement? Well, if you ask me as an audience, I can say that I feel as filling of the joys of spring, like when I see your colorful designs. And I think I'm lucky that I had the chance to be aware of Mongolian culture as well.
Oh, thank you so much. So I think that everybody could share some of their cultures or some of their ideas with the world. It's I think it's definitely very interesting. And as I mentioned earlier, like indigenous culture, or I would say indigenous animation, it's starting up in recent years more and more. Because instead of like going forward to the futurism or going for the super realistic looking 3D or this kind of dominant narrative, like this very linear narrative, I would say indigenous animation or independent animation, they kind of look for an alternative way of telling story or telling their own traditions and story. And then actually in many different cultures, maybe the stories are not linear because it's based on oral history. For example, your great-grandfather told your father something, a story, and then the story was passed on to you. So through this kind of form of communication, it's not super linear. It's not like a history book from A to Z, like a super linear film from Hollywood, for example. But when there are this kind of forms of communication, like oral tradition, it's very like childhood memory. It could be linear because you perceive it in a different way. I think
So in your case, your grandmother was the one who was sharing these stories, right?
Yeah, I think I learned a lot from my grandmother. Yeah.
Well, I think we need to be grateful for your grandmother also.
Oh, thank you. I will tell her. Yeah.
Okay, please tell her our like good intentions and good wishes.
Oh,
Thank you so much for her too. Well, as we're wrapping up this meeting, would you mind giving some of your recommendations to our animation students? Because like they are just starting their journey in 2020. And would you please give us some of your recommendations for them?
Yeah, totally. I mean, a lot of my friends, after graduation from this independent animation program, a lot of them, I think, started working in different studios in various skills, and some of them started working in like animation or art related domains. And then some really continued making their own film. Even some of them, they have their own jobs. They always continued making something like really small every day. I think that I'm pretty fortunate that because I kept applying for fundings from Canada for my projects.
Yeah.
So it's like a model. I don't know how it works in other country. I mean, if it's possible, I think you should keep applying. And there are also artist residencies that support animations around the world. I know there's one in Denmark, I think. I could send you the link. I mean, I remember, now I can't remember the name, but there's some artist residencies that support animation, so you could just keep applying, I guess.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, if you can send us the link, it will be very like grateful for us too. Thank you so much. How do you see your future in this animation sector? Do you have another plans, or do you have like a big future plan?
Actually, I want to keep making my short films, but at the same time, I'm also interested in other art forms, like traditional paintings, for example, or installations. So I'm interested in exploring how animation could be integrated in contemporary art in this sense, not just like, because a lot of people, they would just think that animation is for children, but that's just not true.
Which is not at all. I mean, well, in some cases, which is not at all, right?
No.
Yeah.
So so that's my interest.
I have a little question which I really like wonder, In the first place, well, it's kind of dumb question, but I want to ask,
Yeah, sure.
Well, how did you get the ability to draw such a wonderful painting, How
thank you so much.
How did you get this ability? Please tell us. I mean, please tell us your secret.
Thank you. I don't know. I mean, I'm not I don't have a background in painting or drawing. So, but I'm very interested in painting. So I would say I'm like self-taught. Like I do things like self-experimented way of working. Yeah.
So you didn't get any like study at all?
No, I didn't have formal training in drawing or painting, and then I went to animation. So I would say it's a like self-taught or self-experimented way of working. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Alisi. I think
you.
you are a very busy woman, and you lend your time to us, in some way.
Thank you.
In your like busy time. I mean, I really understand you, right? You're doing your PhD and I'm doing my master, at the same time.
No.
Which is like really human consuming,
Yeah.
For all these things, you really lend your time, and thank you so much for it.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity.
It's a real pleasure for us to listen your insights about art. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. No worries. Thank you.
Alisi, so do you have a plan to visit Turkey?
Yeah, when the corona is over, when people could travel, yeah. And I'm not that far from Turkey now, because Germany to Turkey is like 2 hours or something by plane.
Have you ever been to Turkey before? No?
I've never been there.
Well, I mean,
soon.
you will have a chance, I think. I mean, after Corona, of course, the situation is right now getting worse all around the world. But let's hope for the first. Like, fingers crossed,
Yeah, maybe in this fall, or I think in this fall it should be better.
I hope we can see each other again, like maybe face to face, or like just this kind of interview with your future projects,
Yeah, sure, definitely.
So thank you so much again, and I'm gonna like stop recording,